Okay, so if you're an income investor, right now at this very moment, you might be invested in something like this. VYM, which is an ETF, it's passively managed, very low expenses, and if we're being honest, a very dismal dividend yield. Now, I do want to make it clear right off the bat that there's nothing wrong with equity ETFs. There's a reason why they're the #1 most popular investment vehicle. But if we're looking at this through the lens of retiring early, getting your freedom back, this dividend yield is going to be an obstacle. The super low expense ratio and the passive index it follows is all fantastic, but just the low physical dividend payments as well as the variability between them is a negative. And here is where CEFs or closed-end funds come into play. I really like this article in Seeking Alpha because right here they have a quote-unquote quick rundown of the major differences between ETFs and CEFs. So the first thing is the yields. Closed-end funds tend to have higher dividend yields. And this is for a couple of reasons. The first one is that they typically, but not always, use leverage. But they can also have what's known as a managed distribution policy, which effectively converts capital gains into distributions. And for you hardened income investors, I do not have to explain how valuable this can be. And along that same vein, closed-end funds are actively managed, which of course can be a positive or a negative. One of the major positives of this is what we just talked about, how this allows them to have managed distributions. But on the flip side of that, closed-end funds tend to have higher fees because of this active management. And the final major difference I'm going to cover in this video between CEFs and ETFs is that closed-end funds tend to diverge from their NAVs, creating discount and premium periods. And functionally, the main reason for this is because closed-end funds have a fixed number of shares, while ETFs can create and eliminate shares on demand. And that's why I'm going to say for the vast majority of people, traditional ETFs are the way to go. They're simple, they have very low expenses, and they're very effective. But there definitely are some specialty cases where closed-end funds have a clear advantage over regular ETFs. And I would say one of those is in the case of income investors. And the primary function at play here is the managed distribution programs. So these are typically used for closed-end funds that expect capital appreciation to comprise a meaningful portion of the fund's return. These programs seek to convert a fund's expected long-term total return into attractive regular distributions. So we can see here that the managed distribution policy can boost dividend yields by realizing long-term capital gains and paying it out to you directly in the form of higher dividend payments. But in addition to that, it can also be utilized to smooth out the dividend income over time, making the distributions a lot more predictable. And to drive this point home, let's take a look at the actual payouts of VYM versus a closed-end income-focused fund. So with VYM, over long periods of time, the dividend does tend to trend upwards. But if we look at individual payments, it fluctuates a lot. So this quarterly payment was 55 cents per share, the next one 83 cents per share, the following one 70 cents per share. So it's kind of all over the place. And not to mention, 70 cents per share when the share price is 110 bucks really isn't that much. Now, in comparison to that, these are the dividend payments for BST, which is a closed-end fund. This pays out on a monthly basis, so that's why we have a lot more payouts here, but we can see how consistent these payments are and how they grow over time. So going back to 2019, every single month they paid out 15 cents per share, and then at the end of the year, they had a special, very high payment. Then the following year, it went from 15 cents per share to 16.5 cents per share, 18 cents per share, and now we're sitting at 25 cents per share. And the share price of BST is only 42 bucks, so that's a very meaningful dividend yield. In fact, if you want the exact percentage, it's over 7% right now. Now, for those of you guys that have been following the channel, you know that I'm a huge fan of funds like Divo, Jepi, QILD, NUSI, and many more. Now, these are officially ETFs, but in comparison to a passively managed low-expense fund like VYM or SCHD, these are a lot closer on the scale to closed-end funds in the way that they behave and operate. So if you remember, for our purposes, these are the major differences between ETFs and closed-end funds. But when it comes to funds like Divo, yes, it's an ETF officially, but it's actively managed. The dividend yield is very high for ETFs. The management fees are kind of modest, and they usually follow their NAV very closely, so you don't have to worry about the shares trading at premium or discount like you do with closed-end funds. And to illustrate this gradient, I have 3 different funds right here. So SCHD is a traditional passive equity ETF, Divo, as I just mentioned, is somewhere in the middle, and CII, which is by BlackRock, and it's a closed-end fund focusing on both growth and distributions. The 5-year CAGR is very similar between all of these, with SCHD being the highest. And down here we have the returns by year, so blue is SCHD, red is Divo, and yellow is the closed-end fund. And the takeaway here is that they do generally move in a similar direction because, after all, they're all focusing on a very similar objective: price appreciation as well as meaningful dividend income. But if we scroll down one more time, we can see the actual yearly income produced by these investments, and the closed-end fund is the clear winner, followed by Divo, and then SCHD is a distant third place. Now, Divo and CII, as we just saw, are very similar in terms of performance as well as their overall goal, and if you guys want to see a comparison between these two funds, let me know in the comments down below. But one of the major reasons why the closed-end fund pulls away when it comes to the yearly dividend income is because of that very steady managed distribution policy, and Divo, being an ETF, simply doesn't have that level of control over their payouts. So for the vast majority of people, regular ETFs are probably the way to go. They're simple, they're effective, and they have very low expenses. In fact, if we come back to this comparison, in terms of the total return, the closed-end fund really isn't anything special. But where closed-end funds really shine and pull away is with their income level and their managed distribution policies. And coming back to my portfolio, I'm a huge fan of things like Divo and jepi, and these fundamentally are pretty similar to closed-end funds. In fact, I recently did just open up a position in my first ever closed-end fund, and this is BST, which is by BlackRock, and it's their Science and Technology Trust. And as the name suggests, it's a growth-focused fund, and that's why it's down 24% the past year. But due to its active management, it generates a very high dividend yield. And I'm personally a big fan of that, even on my growth assets, because growth, as we see right now, isn't guaranteed. So during times of this underperformance, which inevitably happens with growth investments, at least you can enjoy a very consistent dividend income. But keep in mind, like with most closed-end funds, you pay a very high price for all of that functionality. So I want you guys to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of closed-end funds versus ETFs from the perspective of an income investor. Do you think it's worth the very high management fees? And if so, what's your favorite closed-end fund? Or do you think with the advent of ETFs like Divo and jepi that closed-end funds are becoming a bit more irrelevant? I'm excited to read those comments. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, leave a like, subscribe, all that kind of YouTube stuff. I greatly appreciate it. But regardless, I'll see you guys in the next one.